The SEC announces the not permanent, but annual opponents. 3 for South Carolina. Who do they get? Who the rest of the SEC get? We talk about it next. Locked on Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler. It is Monday. It's a great day, even though it's Monday. And, we've given the 24-hour rule in effect. We've gotten over the Missouri loss. We're going to talk about a lot this week. We're going to talk about a lot on this show. Primarily this show, though, we're going to dive into the SEC annual opponents that were released. Before we do that, I want to say thank you to everyone making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We are a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Okay, and right now, new customers can bet $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. Let's get into it. Big day from the SEC. Actually, it wasn't from the SEC. Let's go back for a second. It was from On3 and Chris Lowe reporting a day early on the permanent opponents for the SEC and who they be. I shouldn't say permanent, I should say annual, and I'll explain that and why in a second. But we're going to talk about that on this episode. Now, I want to give everyone a heads up on what we're going to do for the plan for this week and today, really. This show is only going to be about the permanent opponents. We're going to talk about that. And then I'll do another show where we kind of go back into some of the more breakdown of the Missouri game. If we're being honest, offensively speaking, it's not nearly as bad as we all thought. I know that we had a fun show on Saturday night where I was frustrated. You guys were frustrated. We let all those frustrations out in our live recap show. But we'll get into that on a different episode, breaking down some of the stuff about where the Gamecocks are offensively, defensively, statistically wise. I don't think that's the right phrasing. Too many Lees in there. But anyway, that'll be that show. This episode is purely about the annual opponents. So what happened? Tomorrow on Tuesday is when I was planning to do the show. Talked to our buddy Tari Noko, supposed to do a show on Sunday with him from SEC Network. They're all excited. Him, Peter Burns, Doring, all those guys. And they were supposed to announce. They're still going to have the show. They're supposed to announce who the permanent annual opponents are going to be on Tuesday night on SEC Network. So then you wake up this morning, or maybe you were up earlier than this. Probably you're up earlier than this. I'm on Central Time, so I'll give myself the excuse. But what they said was, and the announcement was, hey, Chris Lowe is reporting. Here's all the annual opponents. Got to be pretty frustrated if you're the SEC that you have planned out this whole. They're going to release the next 4 years of scheduling tomorrow night. That's on Tuesday. They're recording this on Monday. So they come out with the permanent opponents. Let's get into what the permanent opponents look like for South Carolina first. Okay. I think I can do this. Boom, we did it. Okay, I'm going to move this way. These are the permanent opponents for South Carolina moving forward. Georgia, Florida, Kentucky. Now, how do we feel about that? I'm going to look up some stuff here that I should have said beforehand. Or said I should have looked up beforehand. SEC opponents. When we did this show a while back, guessing at who we thought the permanent opponents would be, the guess that I had, I said Georgia, because one of the things they said that when they wanted to talk about like retention of rivalries, retention of nostalgia, retention of tradition is probably the best way to put it. And what the SEC was saying they wanted to do from that standpoint. They were trying to have, let me make sure this is turned a little bit. We're just all over the place today. We can't do this. We're trying. So they wanted to make sure they had all of or as many of the traditional SEC rivalries preserved. Things like the Egg Bowl, Iron Bowl, Georgia, Florida. Those things they wanted to keep intact. Then there's like a second tier of rivalries they wanted to also keep intact. The second tier that they wanted to keep intact was stuff like Bama, Tennessee. LSU, Bama was on the chopping block. I heard about 2 weeks ago that game was gone. What are some other ones that make a lot more normal sense. Texas, Oklahoma versus Texas A&M. One of those things is going to be saved. I think they put Arkansas LSU into that category. That was a little bit weird to me, but they did. So this is who you end up getting for South Carolina. Why that makes sense to me is because of this. South Carolina, when you look at their all-time records against opponents, the teams they've played the most in the history of their program, Georgia's number 2 behind Clemson. They played them 71 times, right? And then what I said in the last episode, I said, I think they're going to get Georgia for one. I thought that was a lock, right? And they did. Florida and Tennessee, I thought you would basically say, now you'll pick one from this category, one from this category. Like a choose 3, a meet and 3. Georgia was going to always be on there. Then between Florida and Tennessee, they would get one of those. And then I thought it'd be Kentucky or Mizzou. I personally thought it'd be Mizzou over Kentucky because that series has been a little bit better. I think those two teams are pretty evenly matched. Programs are kind of evenly matched to an extent. So I thought that's where they were going to go with that. But the Florida and Tennessee would also make sense because that's the teams you played second most in this conference, right? You played Florida 44 times, Tennessee 42 times. Kentucky, Vanderbilt, you've played 36 and 35 times. Now, I was flawed and I was wrong with the Missouri thing because Missouri, people forget, they just got into the conference 2 years ago. I'm sorry, 2 years ago. 13 years ago. 2012 is what I was trying to say. I'm all over the place today. They just got into the conference in 2012. And so you've only played them 16 times in program history, right? I get not having them on there. There's also this weird thing they did with Mizzou. We'll get to the whole entire SEC in a second. But the teams they gave Mizzou, it was a little bit puzzling. Like I think they gave them A&M and Arkansas and Oklahoma. Oklahoma is the only one that really makes sense out of that bunch. They have a rivalry trophy game with Arkansas, but those teams haven't played that much. But back to South Carolina, I think this is a good draw for South Carolina. Now, I would have rather had Kentucky, Georgia, and someone else, or Kentucky, Florida, and someone else. Georgia is a tough team. They're a tough program. I'm not trying to be negative here, but I am going to try to be a little bit more objective considering where we're at right now with the 2-2 start. This is a loss, right? Like while Kirby Smart is there, most likely this is a loss. Now, I know they beat him in 2019, and I know there's a history there where they've upset him a bunch of times, right? But while Kirby Smart's there, this feels like an uphill battle. Like you might beat him once every couple of years, but year in and year out, this is going to look at you're going to look at this on the schedule like, all right, well, that might be an 0-1. So, but I do love the fact they kept it in play, right? The Florida game, I felt like that made more sense than Tennessee because Florida and the Spurrier tie and connection, plus they played him a bunch. I think this is a much better draw in the immediate future than Tennessee. And let me explain why. Tennessee is on the rise, man. They are not going away. With the NIL and how much money they are going to invest into that program, the resources they're going to put in place, Tennessee is going to be very, very good, way more consistently than Florida is. And that's not just because of being a prisoner of the moment right now. I mean, you think about where some of these Florida teams have been, even when they've been good, per se, it's been in years they've had historical down years for their other biggest rivals. Tennessee, Georgia for a couple of years, South Carolina after the 2013 season, like the drop-off they had for a bit. Florida is going to take longer to rebuild, and I feel like you're already ahead of where they are. Now, long-term, that's a scary, potential sleeping giant. Kentucky, thank you. Thank you. Huge, huge pick-me-up there. Huge pick-me-up there. So I'm glad that they got that. Overall, the thoughts I had on how this played out we're going to switch over here. So this is the annual opponents for everyone. We're going to get into more of this when we come back. Overall, how this played out, I think South Carolina got a good draw. It makes sense. Regionally, it seems like it kept a lot of ties in place. You don't have anything that's kind of weird or forced. Like if they had Mizzou as a permanent opponent, as much sense as I think that makes to a degree, and how I thought that's who they were going to get. At the same time, I look at that and I'm like, some of your older South Carolina fans, or just people that want to see more nostalgia and tradition and things that are familiar in this sport, since so much of that's being taken away and so much is changing. That's a hard sell. That's a hard sell to say, hey, all right, we're going to go to 9 games, and one of our 3 permanent opponents is going to be a team we've played 16 teams all time, or 16 times all time. I believe outside of Texas and Oklahoma, because I remember looking this up on the episode we did before, outside of Texas and Oklahoma, I think that's the team you've played the least out of anyone in the SEC, besides A&M. So, listen, I think this is good on the SEC and what they gave South Carolina. I think it's competitive. I think like what they said they were going to do was try to keep some of the consistent, long-standing rivalries and traditional games that SEC fans wanted to keep, right? And I don't think there's any of that necessarily for South Carolina. Like if you guys let me know, like there's probably some games you're like, yeah, like I would rather have that on the schedule than have Georgia. But like from a rivalry standpoint and just like yeah, man, I grew up watching that game. Like I like what they did here. It's perfectly in line with what they said they were going to do, because these are 3 teams that you picked that you have played 3 out of these 3 are all in the top 4. It's 1, 2, and 4 in terms of SEC teams you've played the most all time in your program's history. So I think it all lines up. I think it's fair. I think it makes a lot of sense. All right. Before I stop making any sense, because I'm just not speaking super well today, we are going to get into a quick little break. We're going to pay the bills. And we come back, we're going to talk more about the SEC as a whole and see the big picture of who everyone got. I got a nice little sweet graphic I made for that as well, and we'll get into that. Before we go to break, though, do want to give a quick shout-out to our friends at The Game. That's right, The Game. I tell you what, quick question for all you college football fans out there. We're talking about nostalgia. We're talking about tradition, all that kind of stuff. If you could go back in time and sit front row at your school's biggest rivalry game, what hat would you be wearing? Yeah, I said hat. For me, it would be none other than The Game. I'm wearing it right now. It's backwards, but I'm still rocking it. I got 3 South Carolina hats from The Game. And these aren't just hats, guys. They're the same vintage-style hats fans wore back in the 80s and 90s. And guess what? They still go for the same price. How beautiful is that, huh? In this economy, they still go for the same price they did back then. When you use code LOCKEDON, all capital letters, all one word, we'll get you your vintage hat for just $16.99. Head to thegamecaps.com. That's thegamecaps.com. Grab your team's classic bar or retro circle design. They got you covered. And use the code LOCKEDON for an exclusive discount, because legends wear The Game. We'll be right back with more Locked On Gamecocks right after this. All right, let's get back into the big picture stuff we're talking about here with, what I just realized, by the way, I'm over here. If you're listening to this, it hasn't been as big of a debacle as if you're watching it. It hasn't really been a debacle at all. I'm just being hard on myself. But I was over here earlier trying to adjust the camera on how to do a side-by-side so I can show the graphic and then also my face. All I had to do was just tip the monitor this way. I don't know why I refused to do that. And then anyway, yeah, ADD is kicking in and kicking my blank today. Let's get back to this. Here's a look at the entire conference and the teams everyone got. Now, I'm not going to read. I know we have an audio audience as well. I'm not going to sit here and read everyone off, okay? I will tell you most of the big ones. That kind of looks better, I feel like, even though it looks off. Yeah, we'll just do this, whatever. I don't know what I'm doing again already. I just talked myself into this. Okay, so looking at some of the annual opponents everyone got. My God, Tennessee. Woo, good for you guys. Tennessee got Vandy, Bama, Kentucky. Okay. So South Carolina, Kentucky, Georgia, and Florida. Let's look at some of the teams that are close by there. Florida gets Georgia, South Carolina, Kentucky. Pretty good draw, I guess. Pretty similar to South Carolina's, obviously. Georgia gets Auburn, South Carolina, Florida. Kentucky, Tennessee, Florida, South Carolina. Bama, I guess I will treat all of them. Bama gets Auburn, Mississippi State, and Tennessee. So they preserve the the Tennessee and Auburn game, and they get Mississippi State as well. That is what I heard they were going to do about 2 weeks ago. The LSU game, the SEC, felt that giving Alabama, Auburn, LSU, and Tennessee would have been too much. Okay. Auburn gets Bama, Georgia, Vandy. Interesting, to say the least. That Auburn-Vandy game, not historically significant in any means around the SEC. LSU gets Ole Miss, Arkansas, A&M. Man, we are just forcing rivalries for LSU with A&M and Arkansas on there. A lot of you might think that Arkansas game has lasted for a long time. It has not. That Golden Boot thing was kind of forced in the 92 season when Arkansas came into the league. Because remember, they were a Southwest Conference team before that. Mizzou gets Arkansas, A&M, and Oklahoma. Okay. Oklahoma gets Texas, Missouri, and then the only game that I have an outright problem with, Ole Miss. Ole Miss and Oklahoma makes zero sense. There's just no reason that team and those two teams are playing against each other. There's not. Like, that's not a traditional rivalry. I don't even know. Hold on. Ole Miss. Just really, really good radio here. They've played each other 2 times. 2 times all time. 2 times. That game makes no sense to me. It sticks out like a sore thumb, so I don't really get that. Then Vandy, Mississippi State's the other one. Now, Vandy, Ole Miss, you could have sold me on. Like, you could have easily sold me on that. That's a game that they've played a decent amount. I don't really get that. But looking through it, you think about, like, the draw that each team gets, and it's supposed to be relative to how good those teams are right now. I've said this 1,000 times before. Missouri is not going to be scared of a schedule. I mean, South Carolina, same way. Georgia, probably same way. I would say, well, no, Alabama is. Auburn, though, like, I think those types of teams you're throwing in. Now, Missouri this year, it's a joke. But playing in the Big 12, especially some of the schedules they had in the past, and the schedule and the draw they got when they first came in here, going to Bama right away, getting in the East, even though they're so far away. Like, those programs stand out to me as teams that aren't going to shy away from a schedule or competition or be concerned because they've had to play them so many times. South Carolina definitely falls in that group. Like, South Carolina is not going to be concerned about seeing Georgia on the schedule. They've been on the schedule a bazillion times. I mean, 71 times, like, to be exact, more than any other team they played in the SEC by almost double, by the way. And also, the second most of any team you've played all time behind Clemson, like we said. So, I think it's a familiar face. That's fine. The Florida game, the Kentucky game, I think that, like, I'm trying to look at this not in a way that's like being, like I said, prisoner of the moment and saying, okay, well, that's a great draw because Florida sucks. Florida does suck right now. But I wish you would have gotten them this year. You know what I mean? Kentucky, great draw. I think we have seen the peak of Kentucky. Like, we have all witnessed the peak of Kentucky. Unless you're listening to this podcast and you are 2 years old, we have seen the peak of Kentucky. It's 10 wins. And it happens 3 times every 40 years. Just point blank, period. There's going to be times where they have some great players. Might even have a Tim Couch. Might have a year like 2007 where they upset the number 1 team in the country. They might have things like that. Kentucky's bad. They are the worst program in the SEC right now. And I'm not just saying team this year. I'm saying program. Like, they have fallen to the depths of that, and you are probably going to see a coaching change sooner rather than later, right? So if that happens, you're talking about 2 programs that South Carolina is staring at that could be going through changes and tumultuous changes over the next 3 to 5 years. That's great to jumpstart something. Anytime you can get some like, feel like you have a leg up in the advantage or like you have, a little bit more I guess the best way to put it is a little bit more of an advantage in any matchup in this conference. And if we're being fair for South Carolina, that's not something we get a ton of, right? That's huge. I think that's huge. So I love their draw. It's not the easiest out of everyone's, right? It's not. Tennessee, I think, probably takes that one. Vandy, Kentucky, Alabama, at least with what we've seen in a combination of recent and all-time. So, I think they got a pretty good one. A&M's is wild because they got LSU, Texas, and Missouri. I think that's more of like a geographical thing than anything, but that's fine. And then, I'm trying to look on here and see where, relative of where the program is right now, where who got a worse draw or a better draw, and I don't know if there is one. I mean, like Tennessee is probably the only one. I mean, Tennessee's the only one. Texas and Arkansas. The Arkansas Texas thing is weird because Arkansas was like adamant about putting that on their schedule. Like Arkansas was the ones who were adamant about putting that on the schedule. So I think that's interesting. I think all of it's interesting in general. I think that we're going to see more on Tuesday night. We'll do a follow up on this for sure, and we'll talk about who they're going to get. Because I think the thing that's going to be more interesting than the 3 annual opponents. And remember, I keep saying annual because we all kept saying permanent, but the SEC came out and said we're going to reevaluate this thing every 4 years. I think the thing that's more interesting is they're going to 9 games and they're really insistent on this like push to have more fairness and equitable across the board type scheduling, which is tough to do. You're not going to make everyone happy, right? I'm not going to defend Sankey going to 9 games. I think it's a horrible decision. But you're not going to make everyone happy, and that's understood. That's fine. We all know that. But the other part of it too is if you're going to sit here and go over, hey, here's the 3 guys you're going to get, 3 teams you're going to get every single year. The other 6 is what I'm interested to see. Does South Carolina get Georgia, Florida, and Kentucky, and then get Texas right out of the gates because they didn't get Texas in the last 2-year cycle that we're currently in? Do they try to keep the A&M thing out of the gates since they forced that whole trophy game on this program, as soon as A&M was in the conference? Is that something they do? Do you see Mizzou? Do you see Vandy? Like, do you see something more similar where they try to not outwardly say it, but they try to make the first rotation divisional? Or do you see a balance of it? So because remember, it's going to be there's 3 teams you're going to play annually, permanently, whatever you want to call it, and then 6 that you're going to rotate a home and home with the first 2 years, and then 6 you're going to rotate a home and home with the last year. So you will see every single team at least once, home and away, in a 4-year cycle, every single year, or every single 4 years. So do you see something where they try to make it more geographically fair and balanced? Like, because you don't want to have a 6 games your first year, like, hey, let's do traditional East games. So you get Tennessee, Vandy, Auburn's close by. You're already playing Florida, obviously, and like this side of the map, because then you don't want to be sending people, like, you don't want to have a season later where you're like, man, we got to go to Texas and to Missouri, and then we get A&M, and then to LSU. Like it'll be interesting to see how they divvy that up, and also how fair and balanced they get to that part, because they keep talking about how they're very insistent on, hey, we want to make sure this is a balanced and fair across the board attempt at making the schedule. And that's great. That's great to say. Will they follow through with it? Because as we saw with Texas out of the gates when they got into this conference, Texas and Oklahoma did not get equal and fair scheduling. I mean, Texas played in the SEC and played like one ranked. They didn't have a ranked win, I think, until the A&M game, which is the last game of the year. They got Kentucky and Mississippi State and Florida, and they got they played Georgia in the middle of the year, and they got A&M at the end. They didn't play Ole Miss. They didn't play LSU. They didn't play Bama. Like they didn't play Tennessee. Like they didn't get anybody. I'm talking about last year. They didn't get South Carolina. Like all the teams that were good, they played everyone at the bottom. So and then you look at Oklahoma, and Oklahoma's got Bama, LSU, Tennessee, South Carolina, Ole Miss. And that's not fair. That's not balanced. What are they going to do to fix it? All right. That is all for this episode. Remember, this is just an episode on the permanent opponents. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I appreciate all of you. Oh boy. I will be back later. We'll do another episode. We'll have an episode for you guys. But just a recap. I talked to a couple of friends of mine, also cover South Carolina. And like Joseph Griffin, the main one, who did a great job. His name's, I think it's, let me make sure I get this right. Joseph Griffin JG on Twitter. Go give him a follow. He's a great dude. And he did more of like a breakdown of some of the film. And it was, it just wasn't as bad as we thought. So we're going to talk about a little bit of that, but also talk about some of the truth and stuff that we need to hear probably that I probably didn't do a great job of and got way too excited and maybe less realistic than I should have been going into the season. We'll talk about that on the next episode. Until then, guys, I hope you all have a great rest of your Monday. We'll get out of here with like I said, some more bills to pay. But I'll see you guys next time. Before we go to and close out the show, let's talk about our friends at FanDuel. Okay, the NFL season is here. FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I tell you what, I love it. I can bet live in-game parlays. I can bet live in-game lines, overs, unders, anything in between. Can also just go ham on some prop bets for player props, all that kind of stuff as well. Lenore Stellar's over 1.5 touchdowns this weekend. Great pick. Love it a lot. So make sure you're using FanDuel. And again, new users, sign up today. Download the FanDuel app by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Also, quick shout out to our friends at Square. Tell you what, this episode is brought to you by Square. It's your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. There's certain businesses that truly make the neighborhood feel like home, whether it's your local sports bar, packed on game days, coffee shop that knows your order by heart, or the corner deli that's been serving your community for decades. These are the places that bring people together. When neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square, see you in the neighborhood. I'll see you guys next time on Locked On Gamecocks.